Ready for a deep dive into something super important. We're talking early intervention and inclusive education today. Two things that can seriously change a kid's life, you know?
Totally. And we've got some fascinating research to dig into.
Oh, for sure.
We'll be looking at, let's see, we've got excerpts from C14_MR.PDF. That's a guide all about special ed strategies for younger children, early childhood.
Right, get in there early.
And then paper18.pdf. This one's a policy document about, special education in India.
Interesting, so we're covering a lot of ground here.
Oh.
Okay, so imagine this. Life. It's like a race, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
But hold on. Before you think we're about to get all competitive, it's not about, beating anyone to the finish line. It's more about making sure every single child has the absolute best start possible.
I like that.
And that's where early intervention comes in. It's like giving those kids a head start in the race of life.
And the thing is, those first few years, they're like, think of building a house, right? You want that foundation strong. Whatever happens or doesn't happen during those years, it impacts a child's, everything, their whole life.
It's setting them up for success, not just like ABCs and 123s, but everything.
Exactly. It's language skills, it's social skills, it's how they handle their emotions. It's a lot more than people realize.
It's huge. So how do we actually do early intervention? I mean, where do we even begin? Our guide here, this C14_MR.pdf, it talks about different programs. And it's really interesting. Like you've got your home-based programs, your center-based ones, and then, of course, there's the combined approach.
Yeah, and they each have their own, pros and cons to think about.
Right, got to weigh those options.
Home-based, you get that one-on-one attention, but maybe not as much interaction with other kids. Center-based, tons of resources, other kids around, but it might be overwhelming for some.
It's about finding that balance, right? What fits for one child might not for another.
Exactly. And that's where that combined approach comes in, trying to get the best of both worlds. Though that probably takes some serious coordination to pull off.
For sure, yeah. You've got all these different people involved.
Right. And that's where C14_MR.pdf talks about this thing called a transdisciplinary team. Sounds fancy, but basically it just means everyone working together, therapists, educators, families, they're all on the same page.
Instead of just doing their own thing, they're like a team, right?
Yeah.
Like a well-oiled machine, hopefully.
Exactly. Sharing their expertise, coordinating, all for the benefit of the child.
That level of teamwork, it's got to be powerful when it works well. Like that, say, it takes a village. Right?
Absolutely. And speaking of villages, let's think bigger picture for a second. Inclusion. Paper18.pdf dives into this, and they make a really good point. Inclusion isn't just about, physically putting kids with disabilities in the same room as other kids.
Yeah, it's more than just sharing the same space, right? It's deeper than that.
Way deeper. It's about a whole different way of thinking about education, about valuing what makes each child unique.
So it's not just about sharing the same space. It's about creating a culture where every child's unique abilities are truly valued.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that diversity actually makes a classroom stronger, makes a school stronger, and ultimately it benefits society as a whole. And this isn't some new age idea. There's actually a historical context here. Paper18.pdf talks about this huge shift from segregating kids with disabilities to actually integrating them into mainstream education.
Which honestly feels like long overdue.
Right.
But I'm sure there are still people who question whether inclusion really benefits all kids involved. Some might worry that, typically developing students can be held back or that it puts too much on the teachers. What do our sources say about that?
It's a common concern for sure, and it's important to address it. And actually, the research seems to suggest the opposite. Studies have shown that inclusion can be beneficial for all students.
Really? How so?
Well, for one thing, it can help reduce stigma and prejudice. When kids grow up in diverse classrooms, they learn to appreciate and value those differences from a young age.
That makes sense. But what about the actual learning? Do typically developing children fall behind when we prioritize inclusion?
That's where it gets really interesting. Studies actually show that inclusive classrooms can actually enhance academic outcomes for all students.
Okay, now that's fascinating. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. When teachers have to adapt their teaching to meet the needs of a diverse group of learners, they become more creative, more intentional in how they teach.
Wait.
And that benefits everyone because students are more likely to be engaged, to be challenged at their own pace.
So it's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. When we make education work for kids with diverse learning needs, everyone benefits. But this all sounds great in theory. What about the real-world challenges of actually making inclusive education a reality?
You're absolutely right. There's often a gap between policy and practice. Paper 18.pdf goes into the hurdles India faces in making inclusive education a reality. And a lot of these resonate globally, too.
Okay, so what specifically does the policy document highlight?
Well, one major issue is a shortage of trained special educators, especially in rural areas.
Right, it's not just about having enough teachers in general.
No, not at all.
It's about having teachers who are prepared to support kids with a variety of learning styles.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of resources. Inclusive education requires funding, for things like assistive technology, accessible infrastructure, and just having enough support staff.
Without that, it's hard to create an environment where every student can really thrive.
Absolutely. And then there's the elephant in the room, societal attitudes. That's got to be one of the toughest things to change.
It's deeply ingrained, those societal stigmas.
Yeah, and misconceptions about disability, they can be incredibly hard to overcome. They lead to discrimination, exclusion, a lack of understanding. It's not just about changing individual minds, it's about tackling those systemic barriers and fostering a truly inclusive and equitable society.
So we've got these huge challenges, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But paper 18.pdf also talks about some success stories, right? Give me some hope here.
It does. There's one example of a visually impaired student who excelled in a regular school in Bombay. This story really shows what's possible with inclusion when the right supports are in place. You've got dedicated teachers, supportive families, a commitment to creating that inclusive learning environment. Amazing things can happen.
That's got to be encouraging for parents, for educators, for policymakers who are fighting for change. But let's bring this down to earth a bit. How do we translate these big ideas into practical action? How do we turn all of this into tangible steps?
It all boils down to this, making learning hands-on, engaging, and fun. It's about tapping into that natural curiosity all kids have, creating multisensory learning experiences that really stick with them.
Okay, I like that. So paint a picture for our listeners. Give me an example. What does this look like in an actual classroom?
Okay, so imagine a preschool classroom. The kids are learning about shapes, right? But instead of just memorizing the names of the shapes, they're actually building structures with blocks. They're sorting objects by their shape, maybe even creating their own shape-themed artwork. They're learning through play, exploration, hands-on activities.
I love that. It's about making learning come alive
Yeah.
instead of just being something out of a textbook.
Exactly.
And C14_MR.pdf really emphasizes how important this is for children with disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. They might need more individualized support. They might need more practice, maybe different ways to access the information. But the main idea is the same. Make it engaging, make it meaningful, make it enjoyable.
And I feel like this is where assistive technology comes in. C14_MR.pdf touches on this a bit. Just imagine the possibilities if technology can actually level the playing field, allowing kids with disabilities to participate in ways we haven't even thought of.
It's an exciting prospect. We're already seeing glimpses of this future. Things like text-to-speech software, adaptive learning platforms, even communication devices for kids who are nonverbal.
It's like opening up a whole new world of possibilities.
It really is, and it goes beyond academics, too. Assistive technology can help kids with disabilities participate in sports, in music, art, you name it. It can give them a sense of independence, of empowerment that wouldn't have been possible even a few decades ago.
It's incredible, that potential.
It is.
But there must be challenges too, right? Like, technology can be expensive, and there's always the issue of access, of equity.
Absolutely. You've hit on a crucial point. We need to make sure assistive technology is affordable and available to everyone who needs it, no matter what their background is or their financial situation is. And we need to make sure teachers are trained to use this technology effectively, to integrate it seamlessly into their classrooms.
It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done.
There is, but the potential rewards are enormous. And it's not just about the technology itself, it's about what it represents, that shift in mindset. When we embrace assistive technology, we're sending a message that we value all students, no matter their abilities.
It's about creating a more inclusive and equitable world, one where everyone has the opportunity to truly shine. And it's not just about shining as individuals, it's about recognizing the importance of everyone working together. Paper 18.pdf really stresses how crucial parent-teacher collaboration is. It feels like something that gets missed sometimes.
Oh, it's essential. I mean, parents, they know their kids best, right?
Of course, better than anyone.
And teachers, they bring all this knowledge about child development, about teaching strategies. When they actually work together, you can create a plan that truly fits that individual child's needs.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's got to be a two-way street, right? Not just parents being told what to do. It's got to be a real partnership.
Exactly. Parents need to feel like they can speak up, share their concerns, their insights, and teachers, they have to be ready to listen, to learn from the parents too. It's all about building that trust, that mutual respect.
It's like a dance, really. Parents and teachers, finding that rhythm together, always adapting to what the child needs.
I like that analogy. And just like in any good dance partnership, communication is key. Regular check-ins, even if it's just a quick phone call or email, can make a big difference.
It's about staying connected, making sure everyone's on the same page. We've talked about so much: early intervention, inclusion, assistive technology, parent-teacher partnerships. But what about the kids who still slip through the cracks? The ones who don't get diagnosed early on, or maybe they don't have access to the resources they need? What happens then?
That's a really important and honestly heartbreaking issue. Early identification is so crucial, and we need to do a better job of reaching those families who might not even know what's out there, what resources are available. And of course, we have to talk about funding. We need more support for these early intervention programs, especially in communities that haven't gotten the attention they deserve.
It's bigger than just individual solutions, isn't it? We need systemic change to address the root causes of this inequity, to build a system that truly supports every child.
Absolutely. And this goes back to something paper 18.pdf talked about. Remember, they had those policy recommendations for improving special education in India.
Yeah, and even though that's a specific context, a lot of those ideas could apply more broadly, I'm guessing.
For sure. And one that stands out to me is about investing in teacher training. We need to give educators the tools, the knowledge to create inclusive classrooms where every student has a chance to thrive.
Not just throwing money at the problem, but really supporting the people who are working directly with these students every day.
Exactly. And it's not just about training for special education teachers either. Every teacher can benefit from learning inclusive practices, right? We need a system where every single teacher feels equipped, confident to support all those different learning styles they'll encounter in their classroom.
Makes sense. But what about that bigger challenge we talked about before, about changing attitudes towards disability on a societal level? That feels like a much bigger task, much more complex.
It's a long game, for sure, but I do believe education is a powerful tool. We can start young, teach kids about disability in a way that's accurate, respectful, and inclusive. We can call out those harmful stereotypes and misconceptions when we see them, whether it's in the media or even just casual conversations.
It's about creating a culture of empathy, of understanding, and those small everyday interactions, they add up.
They really do. And this connects back to something C14_MR.pdf emphasized, creating those engaging multisensory learning experiences. We can use that same idea when we're talking about disability with adults, too.
That's an interesting connection. So how do you picture that working in the real world?
Instead of just presenting dry facts, let's use stories. Art, music, technology, anything that can create a more immersive experience, something that helps people connect emotionally with the lived experience of people with disabilities.
Moving beyond the abstract and touching people on a deeper level.
That's it. It's about moving people from awareness to action. Empower them to become advocates for inclusion, to stand up against discrimination whenever and wherever they see it.
Turning knowledge into action, turning empathy into advocacy, creating a ripple effect of positive change. And it starts with us.
Yes, we all have a role to play in this. Educate ourselves, challenge those stereotypes, support organizations that are fighting for inclusion. The options are endless.
We can choose to be allies, to be advocates, amplify the voices of people with disabilities, help create a world where everyone has the chance to reach their full potential.
That's what it's all about. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. It's a process of learning and growing. But every step we take, it brings us closer to a world where every single child feels valued, respected, included. And that's a world worth fighting for.
That's it for our deep dive into early intervention and inclusive education. We hope you found it insightful, that you feel inspired. Every child deserves the opportunity to thrive, and we all have a part to play in making that a reality.
Thanks for joining us.